Hi, I'm Britt,
And my name is Alyssa.
and this is SkeleTales.
And this is the podcast where we strive to answer the age-old question of, is my dead grandma watching me?
This is the perfect evening to answer that question. We are in our tall wingback chairs with our cups of coffee, and we are speaking with a very special guest on the show. We are talking with Miranda Young from Ghost Bike Explorations. Miranda is known as the Ghost Biker. She's a solo paranormal explorer and historian that travels to different haunted and historic locations on her Harley Davidson motorcycle. She runs a web series called Ghost Biker Exploration and has traveled to some of the most haunted places in America. Welcome, Miranda. We're glad to have you on the show.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on today.
Yeah. no
So we're
problem.
going to berate you with loads of questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Bring it.
So I would like to know what the Ghost Biker origin story is. Like a Harley riding paranormal investigator and a female one at that seems pretty unique. And I'm wondering which came first, the Harleys or the ghosts, and then what made you combine the two?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And really what better way to, kind of live your life and live your passion than being able to combine the two together. And so, for me, essentially, I've always had an interest in the paranormal since I was a kid. That really kind of stemmed more from spending a lot of time with my grandmother. She lived next door. And so she always shared a lot of different stories growing up here in the Appalachian Mountains, talking about folklore and some of the, as we call them, haints that she experienced from the time. And so I always had an interest in that, always had an interest in folklore, and would spend as much time as I could researching as the years passed, and really kind of diving in deep to the historical side of things as well as the folklore. And then I'd always had an interest in motorcycles as well. I didn't start riding until I was in my late 20s because my family were not a family of bikers. They were really not for it in the beginning, but I loved it. And one of my earliest toys when I was a kid was a little Sportster motorcycle. And so I fell in love with that 60s, 70s model style of motorcycles. So, started riding in my late 20s, and I found that after I started investigating, I officially joined a team in about just a little over 12 years ago. I joined a team, and I found that I was spending a lot of time going to some of these investigations on my motorcycle. And then if I wasn't doing an investigation with the team, if I was traveling for a business trip or just out on the weekends, I would usually be on my motorcycle and doing a lot of urbex and urban exploration, that sort of thing, more so than actual investigating by myself. And so I started putting these photographs and started putting these stories out on my social media sites. And one of my friends was like, rather than documenting this through photography, why don't you, put it together as a video? Because people would find that interesting. And so I kind of sat there and thought about it long and hard. My background is in marketing. And so my mind is always turning in that way. Like, how can I brand this? How could I market this? And I found that I was really doing that a lot more than I was investigating with the team, as far as going out on my own. So I sat down, came up with my logo, came up with the fact that I wanted to release all of this as a series rather than just investigating a location and putting, an episode out. I really wanted to make it something with a build up, doing, podcast interviews, doing, media blitzes and stuff, and really building up excitement, and then releasing the episodes, each week that, would, like I said, would kind of be like a series. And so, I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, and I ended up getting it put together and released, and found that it was taking more time than I could do. I really wanted to devote the time to to my solo project rather than the team, because I was doing their marketing, doing their design, doing their promotions and stuff. And so after that first season, it just really took off. And, started doing it full time and being a solo investigator rather than with the team. So, yeah, that's really kind of how the whole thing got started. It really, I wasn't expecting it to take off as much as it did.
Do you find it easier to work solo than with a team?
Yeah, it's got its positives and negatives both ways. I really enjoyed working with the team because these guys were really experienced. I was the only female on the team at the time, and I was with them for about 8 years. I felt like I was really able to cut my teeth on some great locations. We did both commercial. We also did residential. And so I felt like I really learned a lot from them as far as like best practices and being able to kind of go in and take a unique approach with some of the different experiments and stuff that we were doing. But it's hard to find, in the paranormal, it's hard to find a good team that you trust going into some of these locations and these situations. So when I meet people who are on teams and these teams are really tight and really family oriented and that sort of thing, it's a real blessing because it is hard to find people that there's not drama or that there's not issues going with that. So, so that is definitely a challenge for myself. It's either just myself at the location or myself and my videographer. I rarely do more than 2 people unless I'm doing a collaboration with somebody. That has its own challenges because one, the safety of things, whether it be the spiritual safety, because when you're one person, you're taking on all that energy that's going back and forth, between you and the spirits. You're giving 100% of what's going on around you. And you're also taking that in. So if you are in a place that does tend to be maybe a little more negative, that's a lot of energy to take on. Even if it's not negative, when they're drawing from you or when there's a lot going on around, there's a lot of displacement of energy. So that can kind of make it a challenge. Also, you really have to think on your toes because I feed off a lot of other people. If somebody's like, oh, let's play K2 hide and seek, or let's try this experiment, like an Estes method or something, you're limited creatively sometimes. Sometimes you have a little more creativity because you can just do whatever you want, but you are limited because maybe it's like somebody will say something that's with you that will kind of stimulate a thought or an idea. So that kind of makes it a challenge as well. Also, just the sheer amount of evidence and research and stuff that goes into it. I like to spend a lot of research on the forefront before I go in so I can carefully plan what I'm going to do. I'm the one that's having to do that. And then after the fact, I also put a lot of static cameras in my investigation. I keep my equipment bag kind of small because I am on the motorcycle, but also I've come up with different ways to be able to film whenever I'm not actively investigating. And so, if I have 8 cameras set up with 8 audio recorders and I'm there for 8 hours, that's a lot of time to go through audio and video. So I have to do all of that as well as either the video. My primary video comes from either my camera that I'm carrying or the camera that my videographer is carrying. And then we're adding in the static camera elements and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And that's why I tend to release as a season rather than just releasing throughout the year, because it helps me say in 2 weeks, I'm going to have my audio gone through. In 4 weeks, I'm going to have my video gone through, rather than just trying to release something consistently after each investigation.
We have not learned that lesson yet, but it's coming.
One day.
So are you more scared? I like the safety and precautions you were talking about, because I'd be scared going alone. Like, I'm scared to take a walk in the woods by myself, let alone going into a building that is known to be haunted. Location. Have you ever taken off from a location? And then are you more scared of the people, humans, or the spirits you're encountering?
So I haven't ever ran off. For me, I'm always, that's what I'm there for. So I'm like, bring on the activity. Now, that doesn't mean I don't get startled, because I have had things, I've had things pull things off the wall. I've had disembodied voices that catch you in the moment that you hear and the audio also captures. So I've had times where I've been not scared, but startled. And I like to sleep in these locations if I can.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Just to see if I can be there for, say, 12 hours, I like to investigate actively as long as I can, but lay down for an hour or two, sometimes 3 hours, just to see, because I tend to get different activity whenever I'm sleeping. So I always like to test that, active investigation versus passive style investigating. And so, I've had things that have happened when I've been asleep that, had they happened when I was awake, I might have walked out. But
wait, can you give us an example of that, please?
Yeah. So one example was I did spend the night at Brushy Mountain State Prison. It was part of a weekend investigation. And so I had been investigating all night the first night, and I laid down it was about 8:30 in the morning for 3.5 hours in this area that they call the Hole. It's pitch black, it's solitary confinement, and it's where they would put the worst of the worst. And basically, when you were in there, the doors are closed. You had 2 buckets, one to use the bathroom in, one that had your food in it. And after these guys would be in there for, say, 28 days, they were so sensory deprived, they couldn't see very well. Their hearing was very acute, and they were having a hard time walking because of the confined space. So I decided I was going to sleep in there. And so I put recorders all around me. I have a recorder in the cell as well as an audio recorder. I also had recorders outside of the building just to show transparency that there was nobody that could come into this area. And I caught probably 3 minutes and 15 seconds of some of the best Class A EVPs I've ever heard. Everything from solid footsteps, something, I'd been asleep for about 30 minutes. Something literally walks up to my cell door and says night night in this guttural growl voice.
Oh my God.
And when I heard that,
watching you.
Yes,
They're watching you. They are aware.
Yes. And that's the creepiest part, because it's not just that there's this, but see, there was intelligent and residual activity going on. And this activity, it was like, when you know that they're not only intelligent, but they're also aware of what you're doing, it changes the whole atmosphere. And that's one of the reasons I do like to sleep there, because it's like, I don't know if, because I'm going into these locations sometimes, if they're maybe not intimidated, but not wanting to speak for whatever reason. But when you're in that vulnerable sleep state, whether it be because of an astral projection thing, or whether it be because you're more vulnerable and you're just there, the activity is just completely different. It's almost like they're more curious, like, what is this person doing, here in the solitary confinement cell, and a woman at that. And so, but the responses that I got that particular day, I got conversations. There were no men on the property, and I got conversations of 2 men so there's 3 cells there, and it's stone walls in between them. You're literally in this hole. And there was conversation going on back and forth. I also got this very sad, pitiful, just help me. It was a male's voice. A lot of residual. So there was no power, still no power in this building, but up directly above was the washer and dryers and the laundry area. And so because I was sleeping in there early on in the morning, it would make sense. They were probably somebody there doing their laundry. And there's this unmistakable sound of, the sound that the dryer makes when the door open and close. It's so unmistakable. And then the sound when the stuff is tumbling through the dryer. So you could hear that, but there's no power in this entire building. So you could hear that going. And then at one point, I don't know what this was, but it sounded like someone was just sitting there for 5 minutes, bouncing a ball, like bounce it against the floor and the wall, the floor and the wall. And for 5 whole minutes, this rubber ball sound. And so when I was talking to a guy on a podcast, he actually used to be a former corrections officer. And he said, well, that makes sense because during the 70s and 80s, that was one of the items that they would give inmates, because with a rubber ball, you can't really fashion that into any type of contraband. And so he said it would make sense that it could be a rubber ball bouncing. So there was both residual as well as intelligent activity going on during that point in time when I was there in that cell.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And I've had that happen several other instances of locations I've slept at. And I try to be really careful. I mean, I won't sleep at an overly negative type place. I did that once and we had some strange stuff happen. But again, if it is overly negative, I try not to investigate that alone. I have someone that I do like to go with me just for, spiritual reasons and stuff. But to answer the second part of your question, definitely the living scares me more. Just because you just never know in some of these places.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I always tell my kids. I'm like, it's not really the ghosts you need to be scared of. Like, even though I am scared of ghosts, but it's definitely the real people that freak me out for sure more.
It is.
As far as like the negative spirits, do you take precautions not to bring any of them home with you? Have they ever traveled home with you? Have you experienced anything like that?
I do take precautions. I'm a very spiritual person. I'm also a very, superstitious person as well. And so I do my prayers of protection before and after when I'm there. And if I'm being upfront and honest about it, I'm probably usually praying while I'm there, just, cause I don't want to bring anything home. And also I don't actively go seeking out negative. I tend to like to take it from a historical perspective and the stories and legends that people give. A lot of the places I visit tend to be a lot of the lesser known locations. And so I want to take these stories that the people from that region know and love or have heard all their life and go in and see if I can get any type of validation from the location that I'm at. So I try to take that approach. Now, there are certain locations that do kind of have maybe like a negative story to them. I am fascinated by, and, I have a friend that I do tend to investigate those locations with just to kind of see, like Revenant Acres, it had a very dark history, and we went and investigated that. It was said that basically they didn't like having women inside there. And we wanted to see if we would get the same type of reaction as some of these other teams. And they had actually never had two women stay at this location by themselves. And of course, all of these locations that I'm mentioning, I do have on my series that people can go and watch. But as far as all of that goes, I tend to not really seek that out. But there have been two instances where I have had something follow me home, or at least I've gotten activity in my house after. And one of them is a location that we're actually turning into a documentary, but I covered it on 6 different episodes from my season. And it was a house called the House on Sunset Hill. And I was actually there investigating a local legend. So the local legend is of a monk who was killed in a train wreck. There was a flooded out the tracks. The train crashed, and in the community, this local doctor came in and was treating all the survivors from the train wreck. It was said that there was a monk on the train, and that the doctor actually took his body back to his house, put it in his tub, dissolved the skin from the bones, and used the skeleton in his doctor's office. So this is a story here in East Tennessee that people have heard far and wide. And so I was able to go investigate the train wreck site. And it just so happened that my guy who was doing my videography, he had connections to the family who had purchased the alleged tub in an estate sale. Yeah. And so this tub was sitting in an abandoned home in storage. Nobody had lived in the home for about 12 years. And so I was able to take the second part of that investigation, go to the house and investigate the tub. And so we had so much activity the entire time while we were filming the investigation and then filming the B-roll and filming all of that, that I thought there's got to be something connected to this house. Either the house is having activity because of the tub, or it's kind of piling on with the activity that's already associated with it. So I reached out to the homeowner and said, did you ever have, and she's an elderly lady who never goes into the home. I said, did you happen to have activity while you were there in your house? And she starts telling me these crazy stories from the 70s and 80s of things that happened in this house. So I'm like, may I investigate your home? She's like, well, while you're there, go ahead. So I didn't have a lot of equipment because I was doing this tub. Well, anyways, I investigate the house. I end up bringing in my friend Tiffany that investigates the darker locations with me. We got some crazy stuff. So this episode ended up taking up 6 episodes between my first and second season. And we found there were 5 spirits in the home. And this home, it was unlike anything I've ever experienced. You bring a recorder, you bring a camera into that home, it's like they want to put a show on. Wow. Other times, it's like you go and things get quiet. And so this house became essentially an obsession. And I was coming into my house here, and I don't smoke, but I would come in, and when I would be working on different video clips, that sort of thing, listening to EVPs, it would smell like somebody who was smoking had just come up around me. I would come in and it would smell like there had been somebody smoking in my home. You would feel like you weren't alone. You would see shadows. And then it just felt like this house was drawing me in because the homeowner essentially gave us a key and was like, come in anytime you want. And so I'm like, oh, what can I try? What kind of experiments can I try at this home since I have any opportunity to come in here? So there was that one. And then there was the, and I'll just say that this house, I was able to show from conception when we first found out about the story and found out with this local legend, all the way to contacting a demonologist to actually come in and be able to let us film where they cleansed this home. And he had never had, when we showed it, he had never had somebody having like equipment to pick up these sounds and voices and stuff while they were doing that. So it was really fascinating because I had never been to essentially a home exorcism, and he hadn't had anyone record it. So we had to be careful with what we showed just because it is such a special thing. So we couldn't show everything they were doing, but we were able to show all the strange and crazy stuff, to even the floor catching on fire while we were doing this. It was
out
wild. I'd never experienced
I feel like
anything
I'm
like
gonna need some more details.
But the other one was Hell's Bar Dam in Guild, Tennessee. I did have something come in. It was messing with my dog. And this one seemed to just kind of be a passerby that I did put recorders out, did capture it actually saying my dog's name on the recorder while I was gone, and captured something following me through the house at one point. But basically, after about 3 weeks, whatever it was moved on. I don't know if it was an acknowledgement thing, but that's been the only 2 times that I've ever had anything. And the only reason I think the Sunset Hill house had that type of experience was because I was so deep into it. And they don't have any activity at that house now. But we wanted, because we had so much footage, I was talking with my videographer, and because it took up so much real estate and people are constantly asking about it, we thought, it'd be kind of cool to tie all of those episodes together and actually put it into a documentary.
I've got a quick question about this Sunset Hill house. The owner, she said in the 70s, she had a lot of experiences. What were some of her experiences there?
So several of the experiences that she actually had was, her daughters, for one, had gotten they had gotten a Ouija board. Whether you believe that it's just a regular tool or not, they had gotten involved with some things with this Ouija board, and they were unable to destroy it. They were playing it in there, and they were unable to destroy it. And everything they did, it would continue to come back. And so they ended up burning it behind the house. And after they burnt it, the homeowner herself, it was like she was not herself for about 3 days after that happened. And then also her husband had passed away inside the home. It was of natural causes, but it was kind of a freak thing, had a heart attack in the bathroom. And so she had an issue at one point. She actually got thrown out of the bathroom. One of the spirits, when we were having communication in there, we actually were addressing him. We believe that one of the spirits liked to mimic her ex-husband. It was not her ex-husband, but liked to mimic him. And it was interesting because I had the homeowner record her voice and ask some different questions. And as soon as we set the recorder out with her voice, it was the creepiest thing. The floor starts shaking and all the tools start going off. And so the vibe after, because what I did was I set a recorder out overnight with the homeowner's voice with pre-recorded questions. And then I had it in a loop where basically it would play voices for about 45 minutes and then about 2 hours of just silence. And then it would play again for 45 minutes. I wanted to see if those voices triggered anything with the tools that we had setting out. Nobody in the house at all. And every time that homeowner would talk, the tools would go off. And so just throughout the night, well, the next day when I came in to pick everything up, there was just this vibe that it's like you kind of almost like you tricked us. It's like she was not here, and the homeowner started feeling drawn to go back to the house. She didn't go back in there after that because, like I said, she is elderly. But yeah, that was some of the experience that she had. It kind of tied in with this Ouija board and some of this dark magic type activity that was going on there.
Oh, that's so fascinating. You go into this house to investigate this bathtub, not knowing that in this bathroom, her husband's died in there. So, of course, just a wealth of activity, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And, she, we had a lot of things trigger in this activity, and there's really a weird turn of events because the demonologist that came in, he did bring his partner. She's got some spiritual gifts, and she was able to pick up on some interesting things that helped us to get a resolve. And like I said, it's just kind of unreal how things turn out with this. So
I'm sorry, did you say that this is an existing documentary that is out right now, or you're working on it? And
we're working on it. So,
okay. So
yes,
stay tuned.
Yes, season 1 and season 2 actually covers this house.
Okay.
Season 2 also has that where I slept at Brushy Mountain Prison. So the season finale of season 2 is where we actually are doing the cleansing of the home, and we're going to be taking all of those episodes. Episode 2 is the one where we actually talk about the monk and do the investigation of the tub. And so it all just kind of transitions throughout season 1 and season 2. We're going to take snippets from all the episodes as well as unreleased footage to turn this into a documentary.
Nice.
Very cool. Oh, it's fascinating.
So how do you pick the locations that you go to?
So a lot of them I get from different authors that maybe write books about, like, say, for instance, haunted Chattanooga or, Southern ghost stories, that sort of thing. So I like to look at these books and read these stories. Like I said, a lot of them are the lesser known ones. People will reach out to me and they'll say, hey, have you heard about the legend of, I don't know, like maybe Crybaby Bridge or something like that? Have you heard about this place? And so I'll start doing more research into it. Those are the ones I really like to highlight. Like the monk story, that one came from a book, 13 Tennessee Ghosts and Jeffrey. And so this author, she writes about a lot of different state ghosts. And so, the first season I was trying to kind of keep things sort of local to where I was, just to see if things take off. So I utilized some of the stories from that book. So really just kind of going in, trying to go to these locations, see if can get any type of activity, not just telling the story, but also sharing the location and sharing information about these communities that I visit, because that kind of increases and promotes the tourism to the area. And that's kind of where the biker side comes in. Kind of letting people know about some of these areas that maybe they're not aware of.
I know earlier I asked you about the motorcycles. Do you ride a vintage motorcycle then? Your Harley? Is it, you said you like the 60s and 70s sportsters?
Yeah. So I love the vintage style. This one that I have, it is a throwback to a 69. It's not a 69 version, but it's a 69 bobber. And it's all matte black. It's got the peanut tank that the Sportsters are known for. So yeah, it's a throwback, but it's modern. I think it's like a 2011.
Got it. Well, I just wanted to mention that Britt and I are no strangers to two-wheeled vehicles. We were known to tear up the bad streets of Denver on our 49cc scooters back in the day.
Nice. You cannot
we had
our scooters.
I had a Honda Ruckus and she had a Baja, but like there was a bunch of us. I actually did have a little Triumph, like an old Triumph for a little bit. And it was cool. I had very bad luck. I broke my husband's leg very quickly. I got pulled over, got a ticket, and then I also had a motor mount bolt drop into the chain and lock up my rear tire, like literally second or third time. No helmet, wearing capri pants, probably flip-flops. I don't even know. Luckily I don't know. It was going downhill under a bridge. We talked about near death experiences, and that was probably one of mine that in my head, I was like, what am I doing wrong? And it wasn't anything I was doing wrong. And then we stopped and I was like, I'm going to get hit by a car. Let's move. And only afterwards I was like, oh, that could have been like extremely bad. But yeah, so I just we don't know anything about Harleys, but we've been known to.
Hey, given a motorcycle, we could possibly ride it without dying.
Hey,
except Alyssa,
I say it doesn't
Alyssa.
matter. Two wheels. Come on. I do haunted motorcycle rides and stuff. And we always tell people it's like, doesn't matter if you're on a scooter, as long as it will keep up on the back roads there. Come on.
Yeah,
Nice.
ours wouldn't. It was like maxed out at like 32.
Like the old Vespas.
We'll see you guys in like 6 hours.
Yeah, they were perfect for that though. As far as the I'm fascinated about ghosts, but I also love like near-death experiences and stuff like that. And I feel like a lot of motorcyclists have those because the crashes can be so terrible. Have you ever had one yourself or anything strange or unusual that's happened like that, or encountered anyone who's had an experience that's stuck with you, I guess?
For me, it would have actually been when I was filming there at Brushy Mountain. So there's a road that goes by there that's very well known called the Devil's Triangle. And so it's 116. And, you know, it connects to two other roads. But if you ride all of 116, you go past Brushy Mountain. It's extremely curvy. It's one of those that, like, you never know if somebody is going to be mowing their yard and kicking grass out into the road, which is extremely dangerous for bikers. Sometimes there's sheer drop-offs without guardrails there. And sometimes the road is broken and they've got it closed down to where they're repairing the road. It's also the area in that entire area, that community, all these little communities that were there were little mining communities. And so the Freighterville mining disaster occurred on this road where there was a mine explosion and it killed all the men in the town except for 3 guys. So there's a lot of things that happened, a lot of history on 116, and it's just you really have to be a seasoned biker on this road because you've always got to have your eyes open. And so we were filming because, again, I like to kind of highlight roads and highlight locations when I'm doing these investigations. So I was talking about Highway 116, and as I'm riding it, my throttle kept getting stuck. and the throttle cable, as it goes in, it's got this plastic sheath around it, around the cable. And, it goes into the hole whenever you're throttling up and down, and it would get stuck on that plastic sheath. And I couldn't come off the throttle. So you had to manually push your throttle forward or sit there and continue clutching, feather the clutch to keep yourself from running off. And there's some hairpin switchback curves on this. And I'll never forget riding. And I had, my videographer was riding in, we were taking turns riding in front and behind. And then I also had my camera there getting my point of view, getting me from the front, getting me from the back. And once I got on the top of the Devil's Triangle and started to descend into the valley, that's when the throttle went out. And so I'm on these, I come off of it and I'm continuing to accelerate forward. So I was having to, because it's like, what is going on? I couldn't really stop because there was no shoulder to pull off on to check that. So I was having to manually, come off the throttle, but keep feathering the clutch, because once you're on those hairpin curves, if you let go of that clutch, I mean, you're shooting off like a rocket, because it'll automatically peg you out on the RPMs and then shoot it up, you'll redline on it. Yeah. And so I was kind of freaking out. That was probably, you can hear me talking on my camera and you can see me as I'm riding, checking underneath the tank there to see if there's a way that I can fix it. So as soon as we got off the triangle, it was just like, I'm noticing that that's what's causing this. And so I would have to manually stop and pull that throttle cable down just to, keep that plastic from getting stuck. And I had to adjust it afterwards, but I was pretty scared, pretty nervous at that point. Thankfully, it would not have ended well had I not been in control of that. But that is not a place that you want that to happen. Now, is it because we were filming and just kind of a weird luck sort of thing? Again, I'm kind of superstitious. And so when I was filming for the Sunset Hill House, when things started going kind of weird there were a few times I would not ride my motorcycle just because out of superstition. Yeah. And we were filming Sunset Hill House at the point when we were also filming there at Brushy Mountain. So that's probably been the scariest. Thankfully, I did lay my old bike, my Vulcan 750, which was a Kawasaki. I did lay that down thankfully it was more of a rolling stop kind of situation, but I've been very, very lucky, knock on wood, but I have heard some crazy stories from people. And when you talk about them, I'm more scared of the living or the spirits. I'll take that a step further and say I'm more scared of the living drivers than I am doubt. Of anything.
Yeah, it's defensive. Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're okay. But to have that happen at the Devil's, would you say the Devil's Triangle? Yeah. It makes for great content, though. Am I right?
It really does. It really does.
Right. So what are some of the most memorable experiences that you've had since starting your paranormal investigation? You've talked about like shaking floors, fire erupting. Like what are the ones that have just stuck with you and like you continue to just like think about?
That's definitely two of my most memorable ones there. Definitely the floor shaking, because I have yet to ever experience that again. And that just lets you know just the power that you experience at some of these locations that some of these spirits have. Another one would probably have to be one so we just released season 5 back in October, and I covered all haunted jails. And so if I can theme these locations a season, I really like to do that. And, there was one, it truly blew my mind. You have these experiences, like I said, I've had where things have been pulled off the wall, shadow figures, that sort of thing. But to me, whenever they're able to respond to you intelligently, that's a memorable, mind-blowing experience. And I was investigating the old Fentress County Jail. And this is a location that's not open to the public for investigations. They have had a few investigators there. The Chamber of Commerce in Fentress County is located in that jail. They also housed one of their most infamous inmates, and he really had pretty high status. He was on the FBI's most wanted list for a while. His name was Billy Dean Anderson, and he was essentially an escape artist. And so they said that when they had other people in investigating this jail, they hadn't really gotten a lot of activity. But they let me come in 2 weeks in a row. And so I was there about 6 hours each investigation. And so Billy Dean Anderson, not only was he infamous for his crimes, but he was also famous for his paintings. And he painted a lot of pictures, especially of Jesus Christ. And when he was younger, wanted to be a preacher. And so while he was hiding from the FBI, he was hiding out. He lived 2 years in a cave. And so inside that cave, they actually found some of his paintbrushes and old paint tools and stuff. And so on this particular occasion, when I was investigating there, hadn't really got a lot of activity leading up to it, but I had my Ovilus 5, and then I also had a spirit box, and I brought in some paintbrushes. And so as I was sitting there trying to talk to Billy Dean Anderson, I unwrapped this paintbrush, and I never once said what I was unwrapping because I don't like to try to taint any of my equipment that I'm using by saying what I'm doing. And so as I'm addressing him, I pull out the paintbrush, and I was like, if you can see this item here, can you please tell me, what I'm holding? And so on the spirit box, it says paintbrush. And of course, the spirit box is a modified AM FM radio. It's not hooked up to a microphone. It's not hooked up to, apps or anything like that. And so it said paintbrush. And I was like, continue to talk a little bit more. And he said, mine. Well, I then take it into another one of the cells. And of course, I'm talking about him being a good artist and everything. As I continue to do it, I hold it up and I'm like, can you tell me again what this is? And on my Ovilus, it says paint. I mean, I was blown away because there's no way, unless they could truly see me, that, this was happening. So I also asked about playing a card game. I said, would you like to play cards? And I was trying to create an atmosphere of this is kind of what would be going on at any given night in a jail. Really wanted to make them comfortable so that maybe they would communicate with me. So I laid 5 cards out. And before I said it and asked if they wanted to play a game, they came across the Ovilus and said, guess. So I'm like, yeah, we'll play a guessing game. So I put the cards face down and I said, if you can tell me the color, the name of what card this is, the suit, you'll get something for this or whatever. And so I said, but any of that, if you can tell me any of that, that'd be great. Out of the 5 cards, and I was raising the cards up, it called out 3 of the cards.
What?
Yes. And I have no explanation. I was completely blown away by, and this would have been on the spirit box. It called out a 7 and I had held up a 7. And I mean, I have no explanation other than the fact that they were able to see. And so, after that, it said, I win. And
yes,
and said money. And so they were clearly wanting me to give them money for winning. But to me, that was a very memorable experience because these people who worked at the Chamber of Commerce, they're like, we had weird things happen. Someone who came in and investigated before said that they didn't get anything. But my theory behind that is, as a person or really as, someone involved in this, if you have activity at a location and people don't want this activity there, they'll often say, I came in and this happened. And because this happened, I don't go back to that location, so they're conditioning the spirit or whoever is in there that it's like, if I do this, that person's not going to come around. So why would I do it? You know? And so that's why in the very beginning, when things seemed kind of quiet, I would investigate in one area. You would hear something off in the corner. I'd go to that corner and investigate. And then you would hear something in the corner that I was just at, almost like they were going away from me. And so I wanted to, and that's why I went 2 weeks in a row, was because I wanted to say, if you'll do this, I'm going to come back and talk to you. And then also, let me create an environment that you're comfortable in, that, you know, this may be what you experience on a daily basis. And so to me, that was very memorable because I have absolutely no explanation other than intelligent and aware activity. You know, that it may have not been dramatic, but I have no explanation. So
that's very cool.
Those would probably be my three memories, most memorable moments, I would say.
We're complete novices when it comes to all of this. I've heard of the spirit box where it takes AM, FM and sort of combines them and gives the spirit basically power to voice themselves through the waves or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know what is it Ovilus? What is this? I haven't heard of this one before.
It's an Ovilus 5, and it's a very cool tool. It almost looks like a little walkie-talkie. And so it actually does a lot more than what a lot of people give it credit for, but it's got a screen on it, and you can ask true, false questions, yes, no questions. It will also draw. It will do phonetics. But what a lot of people use it for is it's got a word bank in it. And it's got 2 antennas that come up. And so the theory behind that is the spirit uses its energy to manipulate the word bank. And so you'll see the words on the screen. They'll also say them out loud. Sometimes it will throw out just kind of like mumbo jumbo stuff. But other times you're able to, you get certain things that you're able to, put pieces of the story together with. So I'm very careful when I use it, because now it's not an app. It's independent of your phone. So there's no microphone. There's no nothing there's no GPS attached to it that it's going to read from. It's supposed to just be just a straight up word bank. And so, but I'd like to really use that again, rather than saying, what color is this rose that's in my hand, or what, asking leading questions. I still try to be very careful about what kind of questions I'm asking, just so, to kind of help with the integrity and the purity of the responses that comes from that.
So I know you said that it was unexplained, how you can't explain it, but I was curious, do you have a theory about where these spirits are residing? Like, part of the reason we started this podcast is just for some confirmation that there's more after what we see right now, right? So are we going to heaven or an afterlife, or why are some spirits still here walking? Is it another dimension? Is it time travel of some sort? Do you have a theory, I suppose, about
my theory seems to change the more of this that I do, because I feel like the more I do, the more I learn. I am a Christian, and I do believe in heaven and hell. I don't believe that everyone that dies necessarily becomes a spirit, or a ghost, if you will. I do believe that everyone that's gone on has the opportunity to be able to communicate with us. Personally, myself, I believe that heaven and hell is a little bit closer than what we think. I think the veil is thin. I think they're continually all around us, just in a different place. But I tend to believe a lot of things, especially when you're talking about jails, when you're talking about different locations. I believe that there's a difference in the spirit and the energy. And, because to me, I have a hard time wrapping my mind around, someone's killed in a hotel room, and so that their spirit is doomed and trapped to stay there. That just is such a sad existence to me. And now, do I believe that there's energy deposited? Absolutely. And I think that some places hold energy more than others. And that, like with a jail, you've got the iron bars, it's almost like being inside of a Faraday cage. So this energy is being held inside there, especially when something traumatic happens. But I also believe that energy, not the soul, but some of that spiritual energy stays where it's happiest as well, or where it has a connection to. So, I know that's probably not really answering your question, because like I said, my theory kind of shifts. I don't always, in some instances, I do believe we are speaking with the person. In other instances, I do believe we're speaking with their energy that's been deposited within that location. And to me, that just sort of explains why you can have the same activity from essentially the same spirit in different locations.
Yeah, like the omnipresence, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
There was no right or wrong answer to that question. Just curious, and yeah, if I think we'd end the podcast if we all knew, right?
Right,
It would
right.
be done.
Do you have a bucket list of places that you would like to go to?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What are some of those?
So for me, because it's a lot about the trip rather than the destination, several that I would like to visit. I would like to take off on Route 66 and just take the motorcycle, go out, stopping at some of these different locations, and just investigating, doing some roadside investigations. There, the Mississippi Blues Trail, the Natchez Trace, really kind of going and just sharing the stories of some of those lesser known places that are along these very well known routes, sharing their stories and seeing if there's some activity there.
I love this idea. Just like, you know what? I'm going to just leave town, see where the road and the spirits take me.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a wrong way to do paranormal investigating?
I don't know if I would say there's a wrong way, I guess, because all of our journeys are different. And I know there's a big difference. Some people are in it for the thrill seeking, some are in it for the history, some are in it for the scientific. And some are just, not even really sure why they're here. They're just kind of have a little bit of an interest in it. I think there's a place for everyone with it. I think the wrong way is not really setting your boundaries, not setting your intentions beforehand, really knowing why you're in this. Again, it can change once you get into it. But to me, that's, some people, because we have YouTubers and we've got ones that just go in just looking for that instant gratification, and others that take a lot of time, going through their research and stuff. I think that really just kind of defining why you're in it. And also, if you have an audience that's watching, because you do have fakers and different things like that, I think if you define it as for entertainment purposes, or that, this is more of a scientific research thing, I think just setting those intentions and setting what you're there for personally, and then also for those that's consuming your content, I think that's what, to me personally, defines the right and wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
What are your favorite tools to use when doing the investigation?
So I love my dowsing rods. I like those because here, at least here in the Southeast, it's something that a lot of the spirits that we're communicating with are familiar with. A lot of them used them for the utilitarian purpose of finding water. And so they're familiar with that. Also, you don't have to worry about the battery drain, and you can, and they're very simple, because we don't know the spirits that we're talking to. We don't know what their comprehension level is of the tools that we're using. When you're asking them to touch a light, their concept of a light might be a candle, and so they may not want to touch it because they're afraid of touching a candle. Of course, I feel like they learn in time, but the rods are simple, yes, no questions, directional questions. I like that. And then I like my EDI Plus box. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
No.
So it's essentially, to me, it's an atmospheric measurement box. So the box has, it measures temperature in real time. It measures spikes in hot and cold. So not only will the temperature change to what it currently is in the moment. But if there's like a cold rush or a heat rush that comes up to it, it'll notify you of that. It also notifies pressure changes as well as humidity changes. And one thing I've noticed, when that pressure changes, you tend to get more EVPs and disembodied voices. So when that lights up, kind of be aware of what's going on around, because a pressure change does tend to signify that. It also has a built-in K2 meter on it, and so it shows EMF fluctuations. And then it also has a geophone on it, which measures vibration, and something has to physically touch it to get that to go off. So I always like to have that tool with me so I can kind of measure if a flashlight goes off, if a REM pod goes off, if any of these other tools go off. You can measure it with atmospheric changes and see if you can correlate that with anything specific going on in the moment. So I like to keep those two tools with me all the time.
Very cool.
You had mentioned K2 hide and seek earlier, and that just sounds fun, but I don't know what that is.
So a K2 is a basic paranormal tool. In its daily life, electricians use it to find, spikes in EMF. They also use it to find open conduits.
Oh, yeah. It's like the two little, we've got Mitch loses and buys those every day. I feel like we've got like 30 around. Oh, so, okay.
Okay. So that's what that's used for. I like to use it, especially when I'm dealing with kids. I did this on one of my episodes at the Grand Old Lady Hotel. There's kids up on the third floor. And so, you can take it through, and of course it lights up from green to red, and it's supposed to pick up, or the theory is if you have nothing else interacting on it, like any type of Wi-Fi or electricity or even your cell phones, if all of that is turned off and it lights up, it's theorized that a spirit, could be using their energy to light that up. So if they're hiding, we'll go through with K2 meters and, kind of look around, you just tell them you're going to be playing hide and seek. And we've had them pop out. In one instance, I even had a kid hiding behind a chair, and it spiked up and caught a giggle at the same time it spiked up, caught it on the camera. And then also on the SLS camera, caught a small stick figure on that around the same place where the K2 lit up. So when you can get two tools or three tools lighting up at the same time, it just takes it to a whole other level. If it lights up once, or if one tool is acting on it, that's great. But when you can get several, it's kind of hard to deny that.
Totally.
That's cool. I didn't even know I had a ghost hunting tool, or several of them in our garage. I know exactly what that is.
Yeah, I firmly believe that, if a spirit wants to use a smoke detector to communicate with you, they'll find a way to manipulate their energy. We just have to be open, and we have to watch. And that's the thing I love about this. And when we were talking about the wrong and right way to do things, you've got people, there's a doctor that I like to follow that uses medical equipment, and he'll use heart monitors and different things, and copper mesh to try to measure, so I love seeing the unique ways that people have found. And I feel like that if a spirit wants to communicate, they'll find the way that you'll listen to them. We just have to be open-minded and, just really pay attention, because it happens a lot more frequently than what people realize.
A smoke detector sounds like one of the more obnoxious ways for them to try to communicate.
Right.
But we have had one. We had a story about a guy who
we had a listener write in about that.
Yeah, about the smoke detectors using it to communicate. But we're like, oh man, that sounds like a nightmare.
Right.
So Miranda, if somebody wants to watch your web series or follow your live interviews, how can they discover that?
Sure. So you can watch this past season 5, and all the other seasons on the Ghost Biker Explorations Facebook page, Ghost Biker Explorations YouTube channel, and www.ghostbikerexplorations.com. I do host a weekly live stream called Shop Talk Live from the Ghost Biker Garage, where I have podcasters, authors, people who are out in the paranormal community doing things, sharing their stories. That is every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And that's on Ghost Biker Explorations YouTube channel and Facebook page as well.
I just wanted to give you an opportunity to plug the Scott County Jail as well, because we, before this, realized that you are in cahoots with our ex guest. That was not how that wanted to come out.
Reword it.
You went into business with a previous guest of our podcast, and you bought a haunted jail. So if you could just tell us a little bit more about that and where you can find that as well.
Absolutely. So, so I had been doing ghost biker explorations for 5 years, and earlier on, after I guess my first season, I ended up meeting Dr. Christy Sumner from Soul Sisters Paranormal, and we did an investigation at Henry River Mill Village. We found out that we really had a very similar style of investigating, as well as the history was one of the things that was paramount and most important, and then the paranormal secondary. And so we really kind of struck it off, had a instant friendship. And I guess it's been about a year and a half ago, we formed the company History, Highways, and Haunts, and went and opened up the historic Scott County Jail in Huntsville, Tennessee. During the day, it's a true crime museum. And then after dark, we have flashlight tours, guided ghost hunts where you can come and ghost hunt with myself or Dr. Sumner. And then we also have it open as a paranormal research center where paranormal investigators can come in, spend the night, conduct research there. And so, this location, it had been closed in 2008. We opened it up in 2021, and the activity that we've gotten from there it continues to blow my mind with the way we're able to validate through history and really even get some pieces of the puzzle, everything from disembodied voices, shadow figures. You name it, this location has gotten, again, very intelligent and aware spirits. So, you can actually check that out. Again, investigate with us, on the Historic Scott County Jail Facebook page or www.historicscottcojail.com.
That's very cool. If I'm ever in Tennessee, I'll be there.
Yes, please.
Probably not the nighttime one, because I'm a scaredy cat.
And I apologize, Dr. Christy. I think we called her Chris. We didn't even call her Doctor. Oh my goodness gracious.
We were very disrespectful.
Very disrespectful. Sorry, Dr. Sumner.
Okay, at the end of all of our SkeleTalks, Alyssa and I like to ask a final question. What 3 objects would Alyssa and I need to bring to a seance to summon you from the afterlife?
Oh, definitely a motorcycle, and anything from the late 40s to a late 60s motorcycle would definitely do that, or at least the sound of the engine revving.
Nice.
I would probably have to say also probably a set of drawing pencils, because I'm an artist, and I draw a lot of the haunted locations that I visit. And between investigating and motorcycle riding, drawing is probably my second happy place.
I didn't even talk about that. That's
I know.
awesome.
We're both artists as well. We
very
draw.
cool. Yeah, very cool. And then I guess probably that third item, that's a little bit trickier, but I would probably have to say, I'd have to say a potato, because I love potatoes. And
love potatoes. We can do that.
All right.
I love this answer so much.
This is genuinely a party Alyssa and I would go to. We'd ride up on our old vintage bikes that are not falling apart.
Ruckuses. We'll get there in like 3 months.
We've got Tupperwares of potatoes, and we're drawing.
There you go.
Brilliant.
It's a party. Potatoes, pencils, and
potato party.
I was like motorcycles, but that's
yeah. I was gonna say there's no
vintage. Wait, any particular kind of potato or any potato?
Oh,
like or form. Cooked.
Yeah, like fried
potato.
like French fries.
French fries, or just straight up Southern fried potatoes.
Oh,
yeah.
Now
amazing.
I really want potatoes.
Love it. I'm always in the mood for a potato. I'll eat it. Yeah.
That's me.
My God. Like literally, I think we could do this seance right now, but
it would.
not dead.
You would bring
So-
me forward in like there would be no time, and you would know it was me.
All right. Yeah.
I love it.
Beautiful.
Miranda, it has been a genuine delight. And I just want to say I've watched a little bit of your web series and it is edited beautifully. The videography is done so well. Everyone, go head over to the website, Ghost Biker Explorations, and you will not be disappointed. Thank you again.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, wait. One more thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Haunt y'all later.
Haunt
Talk
you
you
later.
later. Good night.